I'm going to just kind of go at rapid pace. So let me just start by saying that I hear sometimes directly and oftentimes indirectly that I don't exist, which I know sounds like a ridiculous thing, but I hear that. I hear that my wife shouldn't exist. I hear that the dozens and dozens of friends that we've made over the years, the last 20 years of ministry, in the circles that we've run in, that they shouldn't actually exist. And that the thousands of people that we've rubbed shoulders with at conferences and trainings should not exist simply because we once identified as LGBTQ, and now today we no longer do. Now, in saying that, that doesn't mean that I no longer deal with same-sex attraction. There are some times when I still feel some same-sex attraction. My wife feels that way. Everybody that I've known who is on this journey, except for two people who are radically transformed, and the rest of us hate those two people, by the way. The rest of us still deal with some levels of attraction, but as I look around the room, I know that every man and every woman hearing my voice, you deal with something. And so why should we be any different? And if there's acknowledgement that we actually exist, then what I hear oftentimes is that we are self-hating, or that we are in denial. And the truth is, I think Jesus says something about denial. He says that we're to take up our cross daily and follow after him. And I can tell you that, and I used to be a bartender at a gay club, and I fully embraced homosexuality, having grown up in the church, having left Bible college, and my feeling toward the church was, and toward God was, I hate you. Horrible thing to say. But I was so frustrated from praying night after night after night from my earliest years of realizing that I was same-sex attracted and believing that God was going to just wave his wand and fix it all. I was so frustrated by that and went to the church, went to pastors, and there was really no help for me. And even well-meaning pastors didn't know what to do with me. And so I left Bible college and thought, God, I want nothing to do with you. I want nothing to do with your church because there's no answers for me. So when I stepped foot into my first gay bar, I felt like I finally found my people. And that really is an indictment on some level in terms of a kid growing up in the church and feeling like we have to be silent in the middle of it. Not that I wanted the church, and this is a very key point. I wasn't looking for the church to embrace my homosexuality. I was trying to get my parents, actually, to come around to embracing who I felt like I was. It felt inborn, trust me, it did. And yet my parents did something, they gave me such a profound gift. They loved me deeply. They didn't kick me out of their house. And they continued to labor in prayer for me, but they did not give me what I wanted, which was full acceptance of my behavior. And the church that God eventually led me to in my early 30s, the church's attitude was, Gary, we don't know. I had some men in the men's group say to me, Gary, I don't know what it's like to deal with homosexuality, but I do know what it's like to have a failed marriage because of adultery. I do know what it's like to have a pornography addiction that I've had for years and have struggled with even to this day. And you know what? Those words gave me incredible hope that I was not uniquely flawed and uniquely broken, that God could actually do something with me. And so Melissa, my wife, is a licensed counselor. This is us and our two boys that you can barely see there. But Melissa also comes out of heterosexual brokenness, a lesbian relationship that she got into in college. And when she got into that relationship, she felt like this is what I've been looking for my whole life. And again, we know thousands of people, just acquaintances in the thousands, that we have rubbed shoulders with over the last 2 decades of doing this kind of ministry. And there's a researcher, Australian researcher by the name of Neil Whitehead, who believes from his research that there are actually as many of us who have left homosexuality as those who are actively involved in the LGBTQ life. So it was so vital to me that we as a church, that I found a church that was willing to speak the truth, but to also be incredibly loving. And it's all those two things are oftentimes not found in the same church. We can hammer on the truth, or the pendulum swings because we don't want to be judgmental and have people leave our church. The pendulum swings all the way to the other side, and we're basically endorsing and embracing everything. And what our ministry, Transforming Congregations, is about within the United Methodist Church is helping to equip us on how do we as a church develop environments. And if you look on your tables, there's actually a trifold there for everybody at the table on transforming congregations. And there's also a trifold there that has my testimony, my wife's testimony in it. There aren't as many of those. There are some of those back at the table still. But our work is about coming out and working with the church, doing full weekend conferences perhaps, or leadership team meetings, having discussions maybe for the first time over the phone or by Zoom or Skype, and beginning to have a conversation of how do we as a church develop environments that are both safe but also transformational. And what I found as I travel the country, I wound up being a pastor for 12 years at this crazy church that walked alongside of me out of my brokenness. They hired me a couple years later. Who could imagine, right? I got up and shared my testimony in front of the entire church of 1,200 people, and about a year later they hired me on staff, and I worked there for 12 years, and it was some of the best, amazing years of my life. I became a man at that church in the company of other men who didn't have my struggle, but loved me anyway and walked with me anyway, who saw more for me. They believed more for me than that I was just a gay man. And even though that isn't what I wanted for my life, they believed more for me. And so I didn't want to remain in homosexuality. I wanted to pursue them more. And over the course of many years and time, God really birthed that. In my relationship with Melissa, we've been married for 11 years now. And our boys, Jaden and Dylan, are just amazing, 9 and 7 years old. And one of the things that kept me in homosexuality as long as I stayed was a pervasive lie that I fully believed, which is, Gary, if you give this up, you will be alone and miserable for the rest of your life. Well, I'll tell you, I wish I did have a little bit more alone time, actually, in terms of ministry and all my, but what a lie. I believe that to be true, and the enemy used that to keep me longer than I actually wanted to stay in many ways. So if you have any questions, certainly look at your brochure if you want, and reach out to me by way of email, or my cell phone is actually on the information. Also, we developed 8 teachings on a conference that we did called Sexuality in the Church. And in those 8 teachings, we talk about shame, male sexual addiction, female sexual addiction. If you're interested, I have 3 free copies. Otherwise, they're for purchase on our ministry website to help support the ministry. Thank you so much.